that scale, that silly machine, go down and go down. We actually recommend just weighing it about once a week. I know that's hard sometimes not to do. It's fun to see the scale go down, but it's a good habit to have just in case we start to see weight loss slowdowns. But why? Why does that happen, right? Why are there occurrences? And I'm sure many of you have ideas and really know why that happens, but we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about some of those factors today and now. So from my vantage point, what we see first of all, with weight loss, the majority of weight loss occurs in the first 3 to 6 months. Is that fair? For those of you that are past that point, is it fair to say that the majority of weight loss occurs in that first 3 to 6 months? Well, makes sense. Your body has made a major anatomical change, no matter what your procedure is, major change. The consumption and volume of food is gone way down. So we would anticipate that being able to recognize significant weight loss at that point is very noticeable. You have a liquid diet pretty much before surgery, right? You have a liquid diet pretty much the week after surgery. So you're going to kind of cleanse your system out a little bit, right? And then you go through the process. And I would say that many of you are very mindful of the dietary process soon after surgery. You're trained for it, you're ready for it, you're prepared for it. I think Armageddon could happen, and nothing's gonna. I think you're gonna stay focused on it. It's gonna be because you're so committed to it. And I would also say that we'll take maybe a little bit of credit for that because there's a fair amount of education, sometimes time, right? Sometimes there's a lot of time before surgery, right? But you go through that process, kind of like studying for a test, right? And the more you prepare, the better you're going to do. Well, think about anything that you've worked really, really hard to get that's meaningful to you. You're not going to let it slip away. So in that beginning, the motivation is probably in a tremendously high arena, right? So how do we keep that motivation going? And is it possible that our motivation may dip and drop over time? All we are humans. And as humans, we have our strengths and we have our limitations. So in that, discussing motivation, that is an important area to kind of understand is what influences motivation, what affects it. Well, if you're very focused on a goal and that you're going to be very motivated to follow through on that goal, and you're going to be able to follow through on the process of that goal. There's two kinds of goals, really. There's process goals, and then there's outcome goals. Outcome goals is what we want. That's what we want to happen. The process is, if I may say, kind of the recipe to get there. So somewhere along the lines, as time goes on, we may be losing a little bit of track or focus on that process. Has that happened for anybody along the way, where they feel like things were progressing and moving forward, and they kind of got a little bit distracted or deviated from that process? See a few nods, right? Right? I think that's fair, but why? Why does it happen? You know, and you are very welcome. I think this is a private, kind of a safe group to kind of share that if wanted. But I think there's reasons that those things happen. And it could be something such as job factors. It could be relationship factors. It could be life factors. It could be that one day in Kansas it's 20, and one day it's 60, and one day it's snowy, and one day it's sun. You know, there's a variety of factors. And so I guess what I'd say is they don't necessarily have to be traumatic and tragic. We certainly would understand that if something traumatic or tragic happened to somebody, it's hard to say, oh, I'm excited about what I'm going to eat for lunch today. That doesn't really get on the radar, right? It's not as important. Now again, if it's soon after surgery, you might do something to try to stay on track, maybe you planned ahead, but as time goes on, that's sometimes hard to maintain. So we have to try to be mindful of those experiences. And before we talk about the bigger ones, let's talk about the smaller ones, such as seasonal changes or family events or holidays. Some of the things that we see that are throwing off our patients in this program, I think, is when something we know is coming, but we didn't maybe prep and plan for it as well as we could. Holidays are past, but not too far past. Was the holiday season a challenging time, an easy time? Feel free to share if you'd like. Was it challenging or difficult for anybody?
It was this time.
It was this time.
The first, like right soon after surgery when I had the holidays, it wasn't, it was a breeze, it wasn't bad at all.
Right.
The following year was a little tougher.
And you're speaking from some wisdom. You want to share with the group how far post you are?
Yeah, not quite 18 months.
Right. Yes. So there's some wisdom there. There's a couple of holiday seasons, right? So the first holiday season, we got through that pretty well, right? The second one, this most recent one, a little more challenging, right?
So next time I'm going to know what to do to make sure that I don't have a rough one again.
Well, and I appreciate you sharing that because that's valuable because we do kind of have to have a plan. We have to have that plan. I call Halloween to about New Year's the toughest 60 days with food. I mean, it's pretty hard. It's pretty hard. In fact, I'll say somewhere from Halloween to Easter is the toughest 6 months with food. But you know that the next toughest 6 months are just the 6 months after that. It's always hard. It's always challenging. There's always reasons, right? So I think the approach of trying to be mindful and aware of what's coming, maybe that can help us. But I don't know about you, but everything seems to go so fast. Everything seems to go so quickly. And I think it's hard to stay ahead of it, and then it's already here. So then the holiday parties are set, and the festivities are there, and it's already here. And it's like, gosh, I should have planned for it, right? Well, let me give you a quick example of one way that we might be able to help do that for whatever the next thing may be. I imagine most of you have a car that has maybe a little gasoline pump light that pops up when you need fuel in your vehicle, right? I think there'd be a lot of people on the side of the roads if we didn't have that little light, right? It's a reminder. It's something that luckily pops up on our vehicle before we run out of fuel to get to our next destination. So that light pops up, maybe a little ding on your car, and you know that you need to refuel. But I don't know if we do that as well for ourselves. I don't know if we set those reminders and know when those difficult times may come and identify ways to address that. And maybe that's also something that's a little bit harder, like a hard anniversary or a difficult time that we go through in life. Sometimes we have to be mindful and prepare for those things too. And maybe have that recipe or that formula or that game plan to institute before it happens. I think that's part of why we occasionally will see weight regains at different points after surgery. So I think that's going to be something that we want to try to figure out and identify what that recipe might be, how you can plan for that. Is there anything upcoming for anybody that they would see as maybe a challenge? So the second biggest food day in our country, isn't this sad? It's the Super Bowl. We go from Thanksgiving, this incredibly glorious, thankful holiday, to the Super Bowl. This gloriously marketed, but it's a food day. Are there any other days that people need to be prepared for at this point? Valentine's Day is coming, and don't be hard on your loved ones if they end up getting you something food-like, because they've done that for years and years and years before. But you can kind of prep them maybe and let them know more about what you're looking for and what you're wanting. But there's always something. Tomorrow's Friday. Someone's got a potluck at work, I'm sure, right? There's always something going on. So I think it's hard to always be aware, but that's what we're kind of needing to do with this type of process. And that's the lifestyle, I think, that we're approaching. The healthy lifestyle. Have we gotten into a healthy lifestyle? Does someone feel like they've gotten into a healthy, more consistent lifestyle? Do you want to share a little bit about that if you like?
Well, I've noticed that one of the things I do now is that because I live by myself and I was wasting so much. So now I just buy the cut up vegetables,
Okay.
and I make my own dip with yogurt, Greek yogurt,
Yeah.
and that sort of thing. And I keep that in the refrigerator all the time.
Nice.
grab a handful, throw it in a dish, and take it to work with me. And I've learned, because I want to say I was a diabetic, but I am a type 2 diabetic. I'm off of 6 out of 8 medications.
Wow, that's great.
In 5
That's great.
months.
That's wonderful.
And so I've always been mindful of stay away from the sweet, stay away, but I would substitute that with pasta, bread.
Bread.
I eat nothing but whole wheat pasta when I do eat it, or multi-grain pasta.
Yeah.
And I always measure it before I cook it, not after.
You know, I think there's a thought that comes up to my mind when I hear you speak. I think you're doing a lot of great things. 90% consistent 100% of the time. Right? 90% consistent 100% of the time. You're staying, that's what a lifestyle is. You know, we're not gonna be perfect. We're gonna make some mistakes, and I think you're doing a lot of things right. But I feel like that is a lifestyle. That truly is what it is. When I hear whole grain pasta, you know, sometimes there's a mindset, I'll never be able to do this, I'll never be able to do that. I'm quite confident that our awesome dietitian, Laura, that's not the emphasis, right? There's a healthy lifestyle approach, and if we make some mistakes, we find some ways to recuperate from that. But, so I think, isn't there an important 4-letter word that you mentioned in there? That's what comes to me as a 4-letter word that starts with the letter P, right? And I think that's plan, right?
Well, and I've more or less done this since I've had the surgery. I plan my meals of
Yeah.
when I go to the store, because it was easy. Instead of grabbing that handful of carrots, I'd grab a bag of chips or
Right.
ice cream bar out of the freezer.
Right.
You know, things
Absolutely.
when I was, and I would let myself get so hungry
Yeah.
that I was out of control.
Absolutely, absolutely. Get to the point of being ravenous, famished, right? Yes. So that's a big lifestyle change.
And 3 meals a day does make a difference. I never ate 3 meals.
3 meals a day does make a difference. And that's important, and we'll touch upon this a little bit today, and then of course Laura next month will talk a lot about some of the nutritional components too. But I think it's kind of good to talk about a little bit of that, talk about a little bit, Laura and I do a lot of things together, so I think that's something important to talk about, because yes, 3 meals a day is important. Focusing on your protein, getting in some of your fibrous vegetables that Laura's talked with you all about, right? But you know what's also important not to do is grazing. Okay, so some of us are nodding that we might graze. And the majority of time that's an old behavior that could be induced by physical hunger, but it's often induced, I think, by the emotional hunger, right? So just as a reference, between 2 p.m. and 5 p.m., unfortunately, this is so sad, but unfortunately, our metabolism drops. It's really unfortunate, right? So a lot of us, when we were youngsters, we'd come back home and have our little snack or whatever it might be, but we could kind of get away with it because we usually, at least in our day and age, maybe we go run out and play. What a concept, right? Right? And but it's unfortunate because that's a lot of times you're grinding through your work day, you're trying to get things finished up, and there's that urge for hunger. And certainly that could be a physical drive. That's probably more, gosh, I'm getting tired, I'm thinking about supper, and I'm gonna get a little snack, right? Now, hopefully and most likely what you guys don't do is do what a lot of people do, and that's go to their vending machines and get their chips and get their sodas and those kinds of things, because that's certainly a no-no post-procedure and in preparation for our before surgery folks, and in preparation for our surgery. The other unfortunate time that metabolism drops is after 8 p.m. So this is another time our body's kind of getting into that prep mode. Now, certainly people do live different lifestyles, right? Many people work different shifts, a flex shift, maybe nights, things like that. But naturally, our body, when it gets ready to go into that sleep mode, our metabolism starts to drop off. Now, if you do what Laura really focuses on and get your protein up, you'll metabolize more at night, and you'll burn more calories at night. If you do some physical activity, you'll also metabolize at night. So these are some of the other things you can do to kind of maybe get back to basics. I think this is going to be kind of our get back to basics talk talk a little bit today, and then Laura speaks next month. So that's really an important part. But plan, but also maybe portion, and then maybe protein. Those of you that know me, I say that a lot. I say that a lot during the day. Plan, portion, protein. Something simple, easy to remember. Write it down, put it somewhere. We are kind of reteaching ourselves, aren't we? Or maybe we all learned this from our parents. Right? I know I didn't. I know most of us probably did not. Right? Most of us probably did not. We didn't learn a lot about healthy eating and nutrition. In fact, isn't it kind of endearing to give a child a cookie? You know, to give them something sweet if they've done something well. I think, unfortunately for us, that kind of sticks with us. It kind of stays with us. So what we're also trying to do, and I think when the weight regain or these plateaus start, it makes us think about that a little bit more. And I actually implore you to think about that a little bit more. Is to say, gosh, am I starting to kind of dive back into the sweets? Is that my old reward coming back? Is it my comfort? Is it something that I need to give myself? Because one thing about post-surgery, a little bit goes a long way in your weight loss. A little bit of protein goes a long way in your weight loss, but a little bit of sugar can go a long way in initiating a plateau, right? But I think the reason I'm asked to speak to this great group today is, what's triggering that? Is it the long work day? Is it the routine? Is it the lifestyle? Is it the response to something stressful? How many think it might be the response to something stressful? I think you're probably right. And you know, it's probably just like anything else. You know, the smartest answer is maybe. It's probably a lot of those other things I mentioned too. It's been a busy work day. Maybe we avoided the whatever was brought to work. You know, I don't like to say too many foods out loud because this makes me think about food. But you know, whatever was brought to work, food, right? I'm sure it was something today and it'll be something tomorrow. But let's say that we did really good avoiding that. Does that stick with us? And then eventually, when Friday comes or Saturday comes or just any time comes, do we tend to divulge into that kind of food? So the other part of this, I think, is, so plan, portion, protein, right? Try to get back to basics, right? What does getting back to basics mean? Any thoughts on what that might mean, getting back to basics? It really is essentially the core of the program. The core, the dietary, the nutritional components, right? So do we remember how much protein we have? How we have enough? Now Laura is here. I do see her. Okay. So how many grams of protein are we supposed to get?
60.
Okay, I think that's a good answer, right? Ding, 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 good. How much water should we be trying to get? 64 ounces of water, right? Okay. And how about what's the next important thing that you want to get alongside your nutrition? Exercise, good. Vitamins, right? Vitamins and supplements, absolutely, absolutely. Is that something that we slip up or drop off on as time goes on? I would say in my experience, no. I don't think as much. But it's the addition of the other foods that return. And people will come back to me and to Laura and other staff, and I'm eating my protein, I'm getting my water, but then maybe the grazing kind of came back, or the sweets kind of kicked in. And once they start to kick in, it's really important to monitor that, because the more you have those, the sweets especially, the more you want them. What's more addictive? A donut? Or, let's see, I want to be good here. I don't want to go too far out of bounds. Donut or a beer?
Donut.
Yeah. Right? Absolutely. Absolutely. But if you go into other higher substances or chemicals that we might look at as more addictive, like some of the illicit ones, okay, sugar still wins. Sugar still wins. It's almost like if you had it at this time of day or night, almost the very next day, it's like clockwork. You want it again. It's a very addictive substance. assessment and study what it is that we're doing. So part of back to basics to me is getting one of the sheets that maybe Laura or I give to you on the before surgery side. And if you need those again, you can always get them on the after surgery side. And maybe do a 1 to 2 week assessment of what's going into my body. Laura.
How do we attack or resolve our emotions when it comes to cravings, when it comes to, that stage, emotional stage with foods?
Yeah, good
Because
point.
I think we're very good, I think we agree that we know what we gotta do, but then our emotions gets in.
Sure.
How can we help with that?
So, cravings is really important, because why, well, the question is why do they also happen? And how do we manage those? And how do we deal with those cravings, right? So to me, a big part of the cravings is, did we also initiate some food to have that craving? For example, sometimes we will have another type of sugar or carbohydrate, and that itself will cause a physical craving. But I think what Laura's referring to is, what about those emotional cravings that we have? Those, foods that we would have at 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night sometimes, or in the afternoons at times. How do we control those cravings? Or even the craving for the food that sounds good that's not quote on our quote unquote regimented diet. Is that kind of what you're referring to, Laura? Yeah. So the first thing is the craving is going to probably occur more when we are tired, stressed, physically or emotionally vulnerable. And so the question is what else can you do for that? Inherently, when you're craving something, most of the time you're wanting something to kind of fill a void, especially if it's emotionally and mentally driven. So the question then would be is what else can I do to compensate or substitute for that craving? Now, one other problem with the craving is it's driven by the thought of I want this or I want that. But I have to really suggest that the majority of that's probably driven also by that feeling. I'm tired, it's been an incredibly long week, we're going through something really hard, difficult. So the real key there, it's different for everybody. It's different for everybody as to what you do. But you think about what else can I do that's pleasurable, that's enjoyable. I kind of talk about this on the before surgery side is what's the alternative going to be? When you're wanting that, has anybody found any alternatives?
I moved my bike into my living room behind my couch, and
Yeah.
that's what I get on is my stationary bike.
Sure.
Because my thing is I'm bored, or I have had a bad day, or one of the kids will call me all upset and I'm a fixer. And so the first thing I want to do is make myself feel better.
Sure. Right.
And so I get on my bike for 20 minutes and then I go to bed.
And that works.
Yes.
So inherently, isn't part of that distraction?
Yes.
You've distracted yourself long enough to break free from that craving, and I think that's important. But the bike, is it the most pleasurable thing to do, or is it just another thing to do?
Not really.
Yeah.
I mean, it isn't now, because at one time I couldn't even move the pedals.
Sure, it's more enjoyable now because you can do it better.
It is.
Absolutely, right.
I am a coffee drinker though, and I found myself since the surgery, I mean, I eliminated it for the first couple of months.
Yeah.
Altogether, well then, 1 cup. And now it's back up to 4.
Sure.
And I don't drink sugar in my coffee.
Okay, yeah.
So,
Well, that's a nice change that you've made too.
I've never.
Yeah, good. Never
But
done
I
it before.
do, trying to figure out a way to give up some of the coffee, so I'll eat like, or drink water like I should.
Sure, absolutely, yeah. Because also some of those old habits come back. I want to talk about that too, when some of those old habits come back. But in terms of cravings, has anybody else found any other alternatives that they have found beneficial to distract or get away from that thought?
24/7 Walmart, you can go take a walk.
It is available, right? You can go.
Anytime.
And guess what? You don't have to buy anything.
Oh, no.
You can just go, right?
You walk down the
Absolutely.
aisle, yep.
And that's part of the theory here. I mean, if you're trying to avoid doing something that maybe if you're trying to avoid something that you shouldn't do, it's important to find what else are the things that you can do for that. And for most of us, it has to kind of take us away from that craving, that what's initiating that craving. So I think that's kind of how I would answer that. I think that's the key to breaking down those cravings. Now, if you're on the before surgery side, my advice, even the after surgery, is you can write down what some of those cravings might be, and you try to stay on top of those. You try to tackle those. You start to think, okay, if this craving happens, I'm going to do this. I promise you, you can think about that better when you're not craving something, right? When you're not wanting something, right? So I feel like that's an important way to kind of break that down.
I'm sorry.
Oh, hang tight. Yes.
I'm not gonna say I've ever done the water right, I haven't, but I've been trying harder lately, and what I've been trying to do is say, okay, before I can have my protein bar for my breakfast, I have to finish 16 ounces of water. So if she's drinking 4 cups of water, or 4 cups of coffee a day, maybe she has to drink a 16-ounce bottle of water before she can have the cup of At least it's a good plan. I'm not gonna say I do it, but I've been trying to play games with my head to try to get more water. Some days I'm so bad on the water, I wake up, my eyeballs are dry.
It's a good point though, because sometimes we need to be reinforced to be able to do the next thing. If you've done something right, it does kind of counter something if it isn't so right. Not that that isn't, because you do a really nice job, no sugar, things like that. You know, we do want to reduce caffeine a bit there, but I like that point. You know, set yourself up at the beginning of the day to try to be as successful as possible. Do those things. As longer the day goes, the harder it is, right? I mean, a lot of you may exercise at 9 or 10 o'clock at night, but a lot of us don't. You know, right? A couple of comments. Yeah, go ahead.
This helps me with not only the cravings, but with the bad habits that are being returned and stuff. I really try to think of food as medicine. It's like if I don't take my medicine, I can die.
Right.
Gotta have medicine, gotta
Right.
have this medicine.
Right.
But if I overdose, it could also kill me. I have to remember not to overdose on this food medicine.
Sure.
Or it could kill me.
Right.
Ultimately.
So the thought of food as a medicine, and especially if you're eating healthy and properly, food certainly does have medicinal properties. You know, I think a lot of doctors discuss that, a lot of medical doctors discuss that, a lot of cultures discuss that, where food has certain properties of healing and certain medicines, and that's a good way to look at it. But you don't want to go overboard. Absolutely. Was there another comment?
What I was going to say is, I don't really have a specific craving, especially since, as I said, I am a diabetic, so the sugar's it doesn't bother me.
Sure.
My thing is, I know I want something, so I'll take this. I mean, I can't satisfy myself, so I'm just kind of picking at things.
Okay.
And I'm really working on stopping that. I really am not craving anything, but I know I want something. You know.
So the comment up front is, I might be picking at certain things, and that might be causing us to maybe overconsume a little bit, do you think? Or is it?
It's just, how do you stop that when
Yeah.
you're not really craving a specific food?
Sure. I guess the counter question I have is, what time of day is that happening?
That's always in the evening. I do great until 8 o'clock. What I have been doing the last couple of weeks is about this much of protein drink.
Okay. Okay.
Because there I went back to the salt, back to the chips,
Yeah.
which I normally don't keep in my house, but I do have a granddaughter.
Sure.
And, I'm going back to taking them out of the house.
That kind of sounds like a back to basics type of approach. I mean, back to basics also is have those things kind of creeped back into your pantry. Have you ever walked in your pantry like, oh my gosh, how did this get back in here, right? It's how did this come back, right? But and I think this may be important. It is important to say that weight plateaus, I think most people would agree with this. There's a normalcy to some of these plateaus that we go through. There's kind of a normalcy there. I think all you can do at the end of the day is do the things that you can do to help yourself and help your health. I think being active is certainly a part of that, but I that's contributing even more. Certainly exercise and expending calories is great, but I'll tell you, I think that's really good for your heart health as well, even maybe more so, because it depends on what type of calorie you put in. In terms of how you stop the picking, well, I've got maybe a simplistic answer. You remember the Lay's potato chip commercial a few years back? I bet you just can't eat one, right? There's something to that depending on what you pick on. And the reason I asked about the time of day is when you pick on it too. And again, I don't want to harp on this too much, but are we tired? Is it the end of a long day? Is it stress? And it's not so much my statement, but the empirical research says that people that unfortunately struggle with obesity are consuming 50 to 60% of their calories after 5 p.m. That's basically twice, right? And I think that's an issue in terms of, why we might be picking at certain foods. And so I think what we need to address this evening is how do you counter those emotions and do something different and get distracted? Because once you do that, and you get through that evening, you get to bed, I promise you'll wake up in the morning feeling really satisfied about what you accomplished. Right? Okay. But again, it's different. The reason I give you kind of a list of this, and this, is it's just different for everybody. The best thing of what I do every day is I get a chance to hear everybody's different. Everybody's different experiences, what their hobbies are, their interests are, maybe how they got to this point is different, right? So we have to kind of go back and think, what are those things that I enjoy, that I like? Maybe you've lost a bunch of weight, and there's something that you haven't done. It was years ago that you did it. Well, now you can do it more easily and effectively. That might be something to get back into. You might not be able to do it the exact same way you did, but it certainly would be fun. If you enjoyed it then, you probably will enjoy it now. Yeah.
Well, one of the things that after seeing you the last time, there's a couple of books by Susan Albers. One is 50 Ways to Soothe Yourself Without Food.
Yeah.
And there's another one I like this. It's But I Deserve This Chocolate, and the 50 Minutes on the Diet Derailing Excuses and How to Outwit Them. So I'm going back to these kind of resources.
Absolutely.
To kind of refocus and get some ideas.
Yeah. Back to basics, right? A lot of times you have to do some continuing education, right? You get a lot of education on the front end, but all the resources, the books that you get from our program, the books that you find on your own, I do think part of the whole lifestyle part is this is the way that you do it. You continue to find new ways and new things and educate, inform. Because the information that you read after surgery, you can read the same book, you'll just read it different. It'll come off different. You'll experience it different. And so I think that's a huge way to do this. Yeah.
And if I've done everything I know to do, and researched everything I know to research, and I'm still really struggling, one of the things I appreciate so much is that I can always come back here and see you, Laura, and say, help.
Well, that's pretty meaningful to me too, because that's exactly what this program is built to be. When you give somebody a tool, you sometimes need to tweak it. You might need to adjust it, and that's what we're here for. Absolutely,
We appreciate you guys.
Well, that's a very kind comment. I appreciate that very much. I know Laura does too. That's very meaningful to us, and that's exactly right. And so, and there's no silly or small or big reason to come back to us. You're going to come back to us because that's kind of in your nature. Not everybody does that, but it's welcome. It's appreciated and it's invited, and thank you for saying that. Yes?
And I know that when those feelings come, I know there's fear, and how can we cope with those fears? Because I can relate to many of you and her in personal, that we fear to go back to where we know we were at. How can we cope with that?
Well,
Because during that plateau,
yeah,
many times those thoughts comes by,
sure.
and that can get us.
It's a good point. Thanks, Laura. Because, so how do we deal with the fear of the worry of the regain? Well, there's two things I'll say there. Number one, fear isn't always bad, okay? Fear isn't always bad. It might help prevent what we're wanting not to happen, okay? Fear does motivate a lot of behavior, and I think it's only fair to say that the majority of people that would walk into a program like this would have some potential fear of that, the potential for the weight to come back. And now, the other part of this equation, though, is don't freak out, okay? Don't necessarily let that anxiety take over, because one thing that's probably important to say is if you're 18 months post-procedure, 18 months post, you might see a little bit of a weight regain. That happens. In fact, the literature discusses it. Nobody wants to hear it, but it's there. It's pretty clear. And then once you get to 2 years, and then you're out to 5 years, it's kind of a stabilization in most cases. But the thing about that initial fear is you can't panic. I think the panic makes it worse. The anxiety makes it worse. The stress, then all those factors that contributed to emotional eating before, they all come back. So, and I think that's where going to the resources in our books and back to basics can really help. But certainly, I think that's where this forum can be really important too, to know that we can come back and talk about this and communicate about it, get some ideas and some strategies to help combat that type of fear. But I think it's a great question, because if I've done something 17 times and I feel like I haven't done it well, then I feel like the 18th time isn't going to go well either, no matter what I did, including something like this. So I think the key is also having that confidence that this is something that can be done, and taking that approach, that confident, positive approach, and that makes a big difference too, that we will be successful. You might have to define what success is. I think one part of this is some people have misconceptions as to where they're going to get to with the surgery. So if you think about weight gain or weight plateaus, set points is another term that we can talk about. We have to have proper expectations for what the surgery is going to do. We have BMI charts, right? If you know me well, I kind of joke about them a little bit. They're really sophisticated. They really are. Yeah. You know what they do? They say you're a man or a woman, and then they look at your height. That's pretty sophisticated, isn't it? that's pretty medically minded, Unfortunately, it's not. What about body composition? What about body, genetics? What about all the other variables and factors? What about age? I mean, I think there's a lot of factors. So one way you combat fear is knowledge is power, right? So if you know about the 18-month curvature in the research, you know about your health history, you know maybe how much even muscle mass or water weight you carry, the more you know, the better it's going to go. And that might be one of the best ways to tackle fear. Think about when we're afraid of something when we were a child. I mean, once you start to gather some confidence and some knowledge about that fear can diminish. And I think that's important. Yeah.
I have a question. Before surgery, I don't think I ever really felt full.
Okay.
After I'm 8 months out, and I've started doing some of the grazing, and this is just very, very encouraging to get back on track and go back to basics.
Good.
And all that kind of thing.
Okay.
But at 18 months out,
Yeah.
do you still? I mean, I still feel like because of the surgery, it's going to be easier to get back on track
I
than
agree.
before surgery.
I agree with that.
Before surgery, you
Yeah.
go to Weight Watchers and they tell you to eat this, blah, 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 and you're
Yeah.
just like, okay, and then you feel like you failed.
Yeah.
I always say I felt like I had 1,468 failed before
Yeah.
surgery.
Yeah.
So at 18
I just said
months,
17. She had
I dieted all my whole life, which got me to 261 pounds.
Right.
But, so at 18 months, do you still feel like you can get full and you can still get back on track easier than before surgery?
So I'll expound on that. I think at 18 years post, you should be able to, if you take care of your tool the right way. I mean, truly, the thing about the procedure, no matter which one you had, it is a different anatomical tool, anatomical stomach. It's different. The size of it's different. Most likely the hunger hormones are taken out of the equation, right? Now, we do have hunger hormones in our brain. They're not just in our stomach, but absolutely, absolutely. This tool,
Ritual eating. It's a
Yes.
different hunger. It's a different hunger now. It's an actual, oh, I need to eat a Greek yogurt, you know?
Right.
And I'm gonna be okay with just that.
yeah, but to comment on that, that's a compliment to what you've done. If you are craving a Greek yogurt, you've probably had Greek yogurt before. If you're craving,
No, I'm not saying craving, I'm saying a hunger. If I'm hungry and
That-
I eat a Greek yogurt, then
Sure.
I'm satisfied.
and that's kind of what I mean. I'll use your terminology. If you're hungry for that, that's a good thing. It's good to be hungry for
I'm
healthy
talking about a
things.
physical hunger.
Sure.
I mean,
No,
you know,
absolutely.
I know they've taken away a lot of the hunger hormones.
Right.
I actually, when I feel hungry,
Yeah,
I'm okay with just eating something, small protein, whatever.
sure. But again, to your point, the physical hunger, you are what you eat, so that food goes into your blood chemistry, and then you physically want to have that. That's a good thing. So it's a compliment to you. But yes, to your point, yeah, 18 months post, if you need to get back to basics, you can do it. I do want to respectfully say, I think there's a timeline for that, though. You know, there is a timeline to kind of get back to basics. You know, if there are months and months that pass, or, you know, unfortunately years pass, it is a little bit harder. But absolutely, absolutely. If your stomach still is in the realm of what it was somewhat after surgery, if you've kept it that way, if you've given your tool a little TLC, it's going to work for you. And it should really work long term. I see a couple hands. Let me go here and then I'll go back. Yeah.
So you're talking about the tool and it's still within the realm, so if you've had the sleeve surgery and you have the small stomach,
Yes.
can you stretch it back out?
So if you have the sleeve and you have a smaller stomach, can you stretch it back out? So what the research would tell you there is, over time, your stomach's probably gonna get a little bigger. Okay, a little bigger. And I don't wanna really tell you exactly the numbers because we don't even really know because it's different for everybody, right? Now your question's important too because you're saying, oh my gosh, is it gonna go back and get to the same size that it was before?
Well, if someone fell off the wagon, so
Yeah.
to speak, and overindulged for
Yeah.
probably an extended period of time.
Yeah, the stomach is still the same muscle fibers and tissues it was before. So if we put in some of those foods that we know we're probably not supposed to do, the expander foods, right? Laura, what are expander foods? Soda's an expander. Anything that expands in water is kind of an expander.
Sparkling water,
Spark,
sparkling
yeah.
alcohol,
Alcohol, beer,
wine,
right? Yeah.
limeade and Sonic.
Lime is That's right, exactly. Happy hour is over, Laura, we're okay.
Overeating for a long period of time.
Yeah,
You know, it's a mental thing. You gotta let go.
yeah.
You gotta
So,
slow down, be done, not drink what you're eating, know when you're satisfied, and let go of the things.
absolutely. So the easy answer to your question is yes, but you really have to, that wagon that you're talking about, you have to be off of it for a long time. That's the beauty of the tool. You can get back on, and again, what I'd implore you to do as I stand here, proudly stand here in front of you today is, if something really hard happens and you've been off that wagon, that's where support helps. But you know, there's two questions I've learned to ask better over the years. One I've always asked well. And one question I've always asked well is, do you have support? That's easy one for me. But my second question I've gotten smarter a little bit and I ask now is I say, do you use that support? That's kind of a fundamental flaw of some of us too. Is we got all the support in the world, but nobody knows we're having a problem because we're not utilizing our support. So that's what we're here for, and sometimes you have to address that either on a one-on-one level or a group level. But that's kind of what this is, you know. So I think support group, there's a lot of science behind this group that you guys are in right now. Support group attenders do better. Support group attenders have more long-lasting results. Support group attenders will actually lose more than non-support group attenders. Yes, follow up.
With that said, I checked out the Facebook page, but it's not really for support.
Okay.
I have a suggestion, question, recommendation,
Okay.
however you want to phrase it.
Okay.
Could they start a Facebook group for us that is a closed group that you have to accept us as members, that we can post, you know, hey, I'm having a great day. Oh man, I suck today. You know, whatever.
That's a
And
good
then other
question.
people can
Yeah.
chime in.
Right.
I'll talk to the
But-
doctors and I'll
has just gotten an answer, so we're gonna
Yeah.
chat with the docs and see what they
We
think
do
about
have a
that.
Facebook page.
Yeah, yeah. I think we want the page, Laura, to have more
If-
support
If
in that.
anybody wants to ask a question,
Yeah,
and if you're interested in posting the question, you can, I'm free to get the questions, and we can post it,
Okay.
okay? And people can answer to the question, but you need to like our Facebook Facebook page in order for you to see the question that has been asked.
okay.
And, we focus on the, pre and post up, pictures, and I will talk to the surgeons about it. And
Okay.
I know different Facebook pages are made differently.
Right.
And the settings are way different.
Yeah.
And I just need to make sure that all the documentation with what the purpose of the Facebook page is.
Well, this would be
It
a
would just
group,
be-
a group
But
one.
absolutely, I agree, support, making comments, making a question, answering the questions, supporting each other.
Yeah. And just one other comment, so Laura says,
Because the one she's talking about, they control the content that goes to it.
Exactly.
But a
Yes.
group one, I could post, she
Right.
could post, and we can all see each other's posts.
But just in our group.
Yeah.
No one else in public
Yeah.
can see it. It would just be us seeing it.
So you won't have internet
Right.
trolls, right?
Right, so nobody else can just read your messages.
very private,
Private.
very private.
Right.
It's called a post group.
Sure.
But that's right, they close it.
You can also do the same thing on Google Plus.
Yeah, but everybody's on Facebook.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Facebook's so easy.
I was gonna say the reason I know about that is because my father is passing away, and we did the same thing. We made a Facebook page, but it's just for family members, and no one else can see it.
Sure.
So, it's just for family members to go out and, make comments and that kind of thing, so I think that's an excellent idea.
Let's make sure point noted, for sure. Let's also make sure we'll have to kind of study that on our end to kind of see what there's certain regulations and rules that we have to certainly follow as a center of excellence, but, good point, and we're gonna look into it, so.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I've got one back here, then I'll come back, yeah.
I'm post-op 15 days from Dr. White,
15 days post-Roux and Y, okay?
and, I don't have any hunger feeling.
Right.
Not yet.
I don't. I have to actually force myself to eat 3 meals.
Okay.
And I don't get the satisfaction, like I'm full.
Right.
I just do according to the book. It says 2 tablespoons and then I stop. Or there's been a couple of times where I've eaten to where I actually start hiccuping.
Yeah, yeah.
And then I just stop. Is that normal?
Yeah, yeah. Everything there is normal. You're doing well. I think what you'll hear from people that have gone through it a little farther is, appreciate that time right now and enjoy that time, but also make sure you get your nutrition. Even I know it's hard when you're not hungry, and in the first month or so post-surgery, the goal is to work towards the nutritional guidelines, and over time, hopefully you'll get there. And if there's other ways to supplement your protein right now, since you're not as hungry, that's okay to do as well with the shakes and things like that. But that's quite normal. Yeah. Is there another question or comment?
I have a Twitter account, and there's one of the pages is called Bariatric Pal.
Okay.
And they provide a lot of information, a lot of resources, a lot of statistics.
Yeah.
There's also several doctors who monitor it.
Okay.
So, they've even, came back to me and made comments and things like that, so.
A lot of good resources. out there,
That's
right?
another possibility,
Yeah.
is you can use Twitter.
The only thing I would say there is, and I'll say this for all of us, we are very protective of you. And we want you to have very specific center of excellence. We're probably gonna go ahead and say, KC Bariatric Shawnee Mission information. We're maybe we're a little selfish that way, but I'm not against other people's information, because I think there's a lot of good information out there. But I think there's a real science that we use behind this. Laura does bariatric dietitian every day. She does, and that's not always the case in some other places. So I've done this for a while too, and so we just want to make sure, yes, you can get those resources, but we're really protected. So just make sure that you kind of follow that bariatric Bible booklet that you've gotten here from us. you know, time goes so quickly for me, and I just looked at, it's 6 o'clock, and it's been an hour.